Here's a common scenario for MSPs, and it's a killer. You've been in business for a few years, and you've mostly grown through referrals. You didn't actively solicit them. They just kind of turned up as a result of your great work, your care for your clients, and the sheer energy that you've brought to your business. But then one day you realize it's been some time since you had a referral, and you start to realize that the referrals have stopped. You get a sick feeling in the pit of your stomach because you realize that you have no other consistent marketing that's happening. If you're in that situation, you can relax. It happens to almost every MSP. And my special guest right now is going to tell you where to get started with your marketing in this exact scenario.
Hello, I'm Sarah Ney, and I'm the CEO of Duct Tape Marketing.
And it's so exciting to get you here on the show, Sarah, because Duct Tape Marketing, which is both a book and has an agency which has been around for many, many years, it was one of the very first marketing books I ever read. It's still available now on Amazon. I guess it's on Audible as well. Most books are these days. And we were just saying before the interview, somewhere in my house, I have my original copy of this from like 20, 25 years ago. It's probably falling apart at the seams because I read it again and again and again when I was just getting started about 20 years ago. So cool to have you here on the show. Tell us a little bit more about Duct Tape Marketing and how long it's been running and what your story is within that business.
Of course. So we've been in business for about 30 years. We've always had specific target markets. We've always worked directly with small businesses where we come in as more of a fractional CMO. So we outline a marketing strategy for the business, and then we go into a long-term retainer where we're serving as their marketing leadership, essentially. And we also certify and train marketing consultants, fractional CMOs, and agencies in our approach as well. But absolutely everything that we do is based on strategy before tactics, and that was a core theme in John's book over 20 years ago. And so we're still holding true to that line. And I would even argue that it's more important now in marketing with the age of AI. And so my role at Duct Tape Marketing, I started as an intern about 16 years ago. I've had pretty much every role within the company over the last 16 years. And then the last December, I stepped into the CEO seat. So I'm about a year and a couple months into the CEO role.
Amazing. Congratulations. And I mean, 16 years in one company in itself is amazing. And to rise from, intern up to being the CEO is fantastic. You've written a book yourself. So obviously there's John's book, Duct Tape Marketing from 20 odd years ago. What's the name of your book that you've written?
Mine's called Unchained: Breaking Free from Broken Marketing Models. And so that came out last year. The emphasis of the book is there's a lot that's broken and wrong in the marketing agency space today. And so I believe that small businesses really should be able to take ownership of their marketing. They should own the systems and the tools and the content that's created. And so the emphasis of the book is really about taking ownership of what you're doing, and that marketing should be an incredible asset in the business that you own.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. There's a few good agencies out there, and there's a lot of rotten agencies out there, and that's the same in the MSP space as it is, I guess, in the whole world. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to paint a real world scenario for a typical MSP, and then we're going to sort of look at what you would advise that MSP to do in this scenario. So very often I start conversations with MSPs who've either listened to the podcast or follow on YouTube or LinkedIn or however they've sort of come across the MSP Marketing Edge and what we do. And the most common scenario is, hey, Paul, we've been going 3, 4, 5 years. It's me and a couple of techs. We've grown the business on referrals. Referrals has been really good for us. And I thought that was how it was going to go for 10, 20 years. And then 6 months ago, the referrals stopped. And I don't know why. I didn't know I'd changed anything, but the referrals stopped. And we need to start doing some marketing. And marketing seems really difficult. And I'm a great technician and I haven't got a clue what to do about marketing. Where do I start? So that's a common conversation. I'll have that conversation 4 or 5 times a week. I know you've worked with lots of MSPs in the past as well. So in that scenario, and particularly since you have a passion about making sure you get a strategy right before you jump into tactics, what would you advise an MSP to do in that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, first of all, it's great that you've been able to grow based on referrals. That shows that, for the most part, you provide a good service and clients are like you and they're happy. So that's like check box 1. If someone comes to me and they're like, we never get referrals and we don't have great reviews online, I'm like, I don't know if you can outmarket that, to be honest. So the fact that you've grown based on positive experiences to this point, like I first would, highlight that because I think that's a win. But I also always highlight that it's hard to rely on referrals alone, especially if they are starting to slow down. And so I'm a big believer in diversifying your marketing a little bit. You don't need to be on every single channel that's out there, but you need to at least have a few channels that are performing well for you. But instead of just like, okay, we're now going to do paid ads, and then we're going to do SEO, it's taking a step back and saying, okay, who are our clients? Where do they hang out online? How do they make buying decisions? What keeps them up at night? And really thinking through those things to then say, okay, what messaging really resonates with the people that we are trying to connect with and target and serve? Because you really need to understand those two things first before you can decide what channel or how you're going to approach the channel moving forward. So taking a step back and understanding your ideal clients and your messaging is step 1 and 2. But then looking at your customer journey, and this is actually a foundational thing that we've been doing for years for clients as well. And John laid it out in his book, Duct Tape Marketing, but it's looking at how can people get to know, like, trust, try, buy, repeat, and refer your business. And why this is so important is because you can sit down and you can analyze what are we doing in each of these stages? Where are gaps? Where are opportunities to improve? And if you can really nail moving someone through each of those stages as they interact with your business, they're going to become repeat customers, which is really important for most people. And then they're also going to just naturally refer you, which then allows new people to move through your customer journey a lot faster. And so analyzing what are you currently doing? What are your touch points? Where is your room for growth? And then that should guide your marketing priorities moving forward. And it also should guide, what channels you should focus on with what tactics. So again, you're not just playing the guessing game. You're taking a step back. You're doing research. You're putting a plan together that's based on who you want to serve. And that's going to give you a lot more clarity and direction moving forward.
Yeah, so I completely agree with everything you said there. Of course I do, because the book I read 20 odd years ago is the foundation for my own marketing knowledge. But it's really interesting. So today, as we're talking here, early 2026, figuring out the two things you said at the beginning, which is who do you want to work with? What's your ideal client profile, as we call it today? And then why would they buy from you? What's in it for them? Which is, of course, your USP, your unique selling proposition. Figuring those things out like 5, 6, 10 years ago was required some hard work. It required sitting down with someone who knew what questions to ask, which directions to look. Research was hard. Whereas these days, we just fire up ChatGPT or Copilot or Claude, and we have a two-way conversation with an AI bot that knows more about these things than we do. So of course it can shape us and guide us. And it doesn't mean it won't make mistakes, but it's a hell of a lot easier than it was back then. And yet, despite that, lots of MSPs, in fact, I'd say many MSPs, and I'm sure many of the other business owners, because I know you work with hundreds and hundreds of different types of business owners, still jump straight into tactics. Why do we do that? Is it just because it feels like we're doing something if we just suddenly start a paid ads campaign, or we just say, right, let's do more LinkedIn?
Yeah, I do think it's just that it feels like you're doing something, like you're moving the needle, you're busy, even though I would argue you're probably not doing the right things. And so I think it's that. And then it's really challenging in marketing right now because there's all these AI platforms you should be on. And then there's all these channels that you should be on. And, people want to have multiple touch points before they'll even reach out to your business. So there's just kind of a lot of pressure in the marketing space, I believe, to do more. And so oftentimes when clients come and they start working with us, like they'll be like, I'm doing this, and this. And I'm like, okay, great. What's working and what's not working out of that list? And they're like, I don't know. We don't know how to track it. And so oftentimes we help people put actual tracking in place based on their efforts and then set goals of like what would make this specific thing successful or not. And then if it's not hitting the goals, that tells you either you should stop doing that thing or you should look at how you can do that thing more effectively. And so it's not enough just to create your list of tactics at the end of strategy, because that is kind of where strategy ends. But then to say, okay, if we're going to do these things for the next 90 days, what's the definition of success and how are we going to track that? Because that information is going to help guide if you should keep doing things or if you should shift and evolve to different areas.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And going back to our scenario of the MSP owner with just a handful of staff getting started with marketing, all of this is difficult, obviously, even with those AI tools. And actually, you mentioned about choosing platforms. I've certainly seen, and I guess you've seen the same, is the overwhelming choice of a few years ago is now overwhelming because there is literally a new thing every day. And, I get 20 cold emails a day saying, hey, we can do you a lead generation system, or we can do, and often you look into it and it's someone who watched a YouTube video and found an AI, used an AI tool, and they've set themselves up as a marketing agency or whatsoever. And it's kind of crazy. So I'm seeing that all of this extra noise is actually creating more confusion. And the downside of that is that the genuine, honest business owners like the MSPs are actually doing less because there's too much choice and too much noise. Are you seeing a similar thing?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And like LinkedIn is another example to email. I mean, I used to use LinkedIn very heavily. I would connect with people, message people. I'm still on there very frequently, but I rarely check my messages because it's literally like outbound pitch,
Yeah.
like AI spam. You can just like filter, you can see it all there. And so that's the same with email. I get, at least 20 a day, I feel like, as well. And so it is more challenging to stand out because even if a human's reaching out to me on LinkedIn authentically, I'm less likely to check my messages that frequently because I'm just tired of it. And so it is harder to get people's attention and it's harder to stand out. But that's where, I think if you approach marketing with a more authentic human feel to it and not just trying to scale with AI, there is opportunity for people to see your authentic selves versus, spamming without AI or with AI platforms.
Yeah, I completely agree. I believe the AI tools are a way of taking your authentic personality and stretching it out to help you appear in more places through repurposing content. It terrifies me when an MSP says to me, "Oh, I'm going to go and use 11 Labs to clone my voice or clone my video," and I'm like, "Please don't do that," because even if we can't spot it, it's the most inauthentic thing that you can do. And actually, I think as AI slop gets greater and greater and greater, the actual real, like we're two real humans talking to each other, right? And that's the most authentic thing. And I think we're going to seek that as humans as more AI content comes out there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I'm not saying like all AI is bad for content. Like we use it, within our company, and it is good for like if you, for example, capture like a leadership story of a company and then being able to transfer that into different forms of written content, or this podcast, I'm sure you use AI to repurpose into clips and to blog posts, and you might be using for that. So I think there is a place for AI, but where people miss is that slop component is, they'll just go to AI for the ideas and they'll go to AI for the content, and then it just sounds like anyone else. And so, if you're using AI, great. I do think you should be using AI, but you need to always remember human on the front end. Like you need to give it insight. You need to give it direction. You need to give it your stories. And then you need to edit on the back end as well. And that's where it can be powerful, is it helps elevate you in your skill set and not replace your creativity.
Yeah, completely agree. I've just agreed with everything that you said today. What a terrible interviewer I am. We should have conflict here. We really should. Final question for you, Sarah. And unfortunately, I am going to jump into a tactical conversation because I do know that makes an easy takeaway for the MSPs listening and watching this on YouTube. You've got a couple of $100 a month. That's it. You're an MSP. It's the same scenario as before. Where would you put that couple of $100 right now?
Couple $100 a month, I would do a couple things. I would look at content repurposing. And so content used to be really overwhelming to create, but with AI, you can do a lot more. And so, starting with recording some videos on very specific topics that your target audience needs to know about, using those videos then to turn it into social clips and email newsletters and blog posts on your website. As long as you're doing it thoughtfully and with purpose, I think that can go a long way. And so obviously there's some costs in investing in tools to help to support you there. So that would be one area that I would lean into. And honestly, in the B2B space, like I would focus on you creating a list of people that you wanted to reach out to or connect with, your ideal target market, and then very thoughtfully calling them, texting them, reaching out to them as a human, because they're going to immediately see how that's different. And another one more I would add to the equation is a low cost thing is podcasting as well. I tell everyone in business that they should be podcasting because you're essentially just spending your time to get in front of other people's audience to spread, word about your offerings and businesses in some cases. And so those are some low cost things that require time, but not a huge spend when it comes to marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. And taking it right back to what you said at the beginning, if you know exactly who your ideal client is, and if we take just the podcast, for example, and you do a podcast that ideal client would be absolutely fascinated with, it's an easy match. It's an absolute easy match. And typically the smaller defined your audience and the more clear you are and yeah, the more narrow that is, the easier that gets. Sarah, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on. So tell us a little bit about what duct tape marketing actually does to help MSPs and what's the best way to get in touch with you.
Of course. So as we talked a lot about in this interview, we lead with strategy before tactics. And so with all clients, you would come in, we would create an overall marketing strategy for you. And then you would have the plan that you could either run with in your team internally, or you could keep us on as a fractional CMO long-term. And so you can find us at ducttapemarketing.com. And I'm also very active on LinkedIn. Again, my name is Sarah Ney.
For MSPs around the world, the MSP Marketing Podcast with Paul Green.